It's hard to believe that such a thing still happens these days. I found myself thinking vaguely about it in the narrow hallway of my apartment. There was a thick envelope on the small showbox. Inside it was payoff money. I had a girlfriend. Her name was Michelle. She was the only daughter of the chairman of the Johnson General Hospital, one of the largest hospitals in town. Last night, I proposed to Michelle, and this is the result. Suddenly, Michelle's father showed up at my apartment and looked at me as if I were trash. He said, "I won't let my daughter marry an uneducated loser." Then, saying it's payoff money, he left a thick envelope on the table. Michelle seems to have had her cell phone taken away by her father, so I can't get in touch with her. Just like that, my relationship with Michelle abruptly ended. My name is Rick, and I turned 32 this year. Currently, I'm the vice president of a gaming company I started with a friend. There were a lot of ups and downs to get here, but I believe everything has been a learning experience for me. Deep in my heart, there are things that I've yet to fully come to terms with. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother raised me on her own. Ever since middle school, I wanted to start working early. Being the eldest son, I have 3 younger sisters. When I told my mom that I had decided to quit high school and work while attending night school, she looked at me with guilt and bowed deeply to me. It wasn't that I loved studying, but telling her about the night school was more of an excuse to make her understand. I remember feeling humbled when she bowed so deeply. Together, my mom and I supported our family, ensuring my sisters could follow their desired paths. That gave me a lot of confidence. In the end, I kept working at a florist that I've been part of since my part-time days. That's when I first met Michelle. I think I was 25 and she was 22. Every Monday and Thursday afternoon, she would come into the shop to buy fresh flowers. She never bought large bouquets, just a few stems, and then she'd leave. We'd exchange a few words every time. Little by little, I found myself drawn to her shy and modest character. Michelle is the kind of girl you don't often see these days, with a quiet, reserved, and pure demeanour. Even someone as thick-skinned as me could immediately tell from the way she carried herself that she came from a good upbringing. On Valentine's Day, when she gave me chocolates, I realized for the first time that she had feelings for me. I asked her out right then and there. Our relationship was smooth sailing. We never had an argument. Life was hectic for me. Being invited to co-found a business by a friend might have been a contributing factor. The only time Michelle and I could really meet was on Sundays. With my sister still in school and tuition fees to pay, I didn't have a lot of money for myself. Our dates were mostly in the park. Every time, Michelle would bring along a homemade lunch, and we'd spend our time in the park. I loved that. After dating for a year, I mustered up the courage to propose to her. I felt that if Michelle stayed by my side for the rest of my life, I could push myself many times harder. I couldn't afford a ring worth 3 months of my salary and got her a cheaper one, but Michelle cried tears of joy after she saw it. She kept repeating, "Thank you." I swore I'd make her happy, but by the next morning, I felt like I'd been thrown into hell. The last time I saw Michelle, she had a tear-streaked face from crying with happiness. Our time together ended right there. Starting today, we have a few new recruits coming in. I was approached by HR as soon as I arrived at the office. The company had grown unimaginably since its inception, with almost 30 employees. After my heartbreak, I got seriously involved in a startup with a friend. He founded a gaming company. I've always loved games, and after seeing a game I created, he approached me to co-found the company. I dedicated myself to this job. The company grew rapidly. Now we're focusing on nurturing esports talents. My current job involves scouting esports players. It's quite a fulfilling job. Many young folks aspire to be professional esports players, but taking that first step can be challenging. I believe it's because its recognition in society is still somewhat limited. When job prospects come up, I bet very few parents would understand if their child says, "I want to be a pro gamer." Many kids are already making money by streaming games, but few share that with their parents. Streamers who make a living off game streaming need to put in the effort to make others understand their line of work. I support those kids who feel stuck because those around them don't understand what they're passionate about. I believe my job is to back their dreams. The recruits coming in today are between 18 and 26 years old. We plan to hire them as professionals. Among them, there's one guy I see as a key player. His name is Key. He's a player who excels in multiplayer online battle arenas, MOBA. Simply put, MOBA is a game style where you team up and cooperate with allies to attack and conquer the enemy's base. It requires both strategy and ability to make split-second decisions. I felt Key had an exceptional talent. "I'm Key Johnson. It is a pleasure to meet you all," he said, introducing himself. He's tall and good-looking, although he seemed a bit rough around the edges. The way he responded and carried himself showed he came from a good upbringing. A good young man. The women in the office were clearly impressed by him. After a brief greeting, Key started handling insurance paperwork and other administrative tasks in the HR department. It's a busy day since there are other new hires, and each needs to be directed to their respective departments. That's when I overheard a surprised voice from one of the female clerks. My feet stopped dead in their tracks when the clerk said, "He's the son of the Johnson General Hospital chairman. You know, Johnson General Hospital is the home of a girl like..." Can't forget Michelle. I remember Michelle mentioning that she's an only daughter with one younger brother who doesn't have the inclination or aptitude for medical studies. Now I understand why Michelle's dad told me her future husband has to be a doctor. It might be pointless to think about it now, but if Key had gone to med school and become a doctor, maybe Michelle, and I could have gotten married. I was called an uneducated trash. The opposition to our marriage wasn't just because of inheritance issues. I admit that I had my own shortcomings, yet I couldn't help but wonder what if I had become a doctor. A fact I never realized when I first scouted Key. Would I have recruited him if I'd known he was Michelle's brother? Mixing personal feelings with business is downright unacceptable. I kept reminding myself of that. Otherwise, I couldn't imagine supporting Key's dream. Key, as I thought, immediately became a vital member of our team. At the welcome party, he introduced himself, saying he was the son of a hospital chairman, but couldn't give up his dream, so he left. Everyone gave him a warm applause for his determination. I clapped along, but something still felt off. "You don't go home, you live alone, right?" I casually inquired about his personal life during the party. "I've cut ties with my family. When I said I didn't want to become a doctor, they disowned me. I think my sister will have to marry someone taking over the hospital," Keith mumbled. I do feel a bit guilty about my sister watching him. I felt a burning anger rise within me. Must be tough for your sister, all because you decided to be selfish. She's taking all the heat because of you, isn't she? Even I thought it was a mean thing to say. At that moment, I couldn't control my emotions. I harshly lashed out at a man almost a decade younger than me. Keith flinched slightly but firmly said, "I don't regret it. I know my dream might have come at someone else's expense, but I can't give up." The thought of giving up never even crossed my mind. That's the determination I bring here. Keith spoke of his determination. I wished I could blame him for distorting the future Rochelle, and I could have had. Such pettiness made me ashamed of myself. Still, the unresolved feelings continued to smoulder within me. In esports, maintaining concentration amidst high tension is crucial, especially in the game Keith plays. This is essential. It's the same even in regular practice matches. There's constant competition within the team, no different from any other sport. Only the best among the team get to play in matches. Those who can't produce results get phased out. That's the world of professionals. Many push themselves too hard and get sick. It's our job to guide them so that doesn't happen. Keith has a touch of genius, but he never forgets to work hard. I deeply wanted to support him, but I felt ashamed of my inability to do so. Then the incident happened. It was Keith's official debut match, a big tournament with a large number of participating teams. It was a knockout format. Keith's team kept on winning. With the lights dimmed in the venue, a large monitor lit up. Players sat in front of computers engrossed in their game, surrounded by a large audience. They had to keep their composure during the match. If they let the pressure get to them, they'd lose. Holding my breath, I closely watched Keith's character across the screen. Then it seemed like Keith, seated in his chair, tilted his head slightly. The next moment, with a crashing sound, Keith fell from his chair to the ground. On the screen, the character controlled by Keith stood still as the opposing team attacked. "Are you okay, Keith?" I rushed over to find Keith gasping for breath on the floor. An ambulance was immediately called. When it arrived, I ended up riding with him. The paramedic told me we're heading to the Johnson General Hospital's emergency room. I was a bit surprised. It seems there is a mysterious connection between the Johnsons and me. I tried to avoid it, but it felt like I was drawing this fate closer. I felt uneasy when he was brought into the emergency room. I waited outside the treatment room. Suddenly, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps approaching down the hallway. I didn't want to assume, but I couldn't help but feel tense. My suspicions were confirmed. It was Michelle, now grown into a mature woman. She walked toward me with a pale face. She must have been taught not to run in the hospital corridors since she was a child. A frustrated frown creased her forehead. "You're from Keith's company, right? Where's Keith?" "How's Keith doing?" she said, looking at the treatment room's door, completely unaware of my presence. She was looking at the door and didn't notice me at all. She was clearly worried about her younger brother and seemed too preoccupied to notice anything else. I felt bad for Kay, but my heart raced more for Rochelle. He just went into the treatment room. I managed to answer, and Michelle's slender shoulders shuddered. Then, with great force, she turned to me. Her white eyes looked as if they could overflow with tears, staring deep into mine. "Is it Rick?" Her voice trembled as she asked. I nodded confidently in response. "It's been a while. Who would have thought we'd meet like this?" Michelle looked like she was about to burst into tears any moment. I was frozen, not knowing what to do. The tension between us was broken by the nurse's invitation. "Please come in." Normally, only family would be allowed in. "Can I come in too?" "I'm really worried." When I asked, Michelle gave a small nod in agreement. Keith was lying in bed with an IV drip. He looked much better, which was a bit relieving. "Doctor, how's he doing? Is he going to be okay?" Michelle, clutching the hem of my jacket, looked up with concern. I spoke up on her behalf, addressing the doctor. The doctor said he's overworked, probably pushed himself too hard, lack of sleep, not eating right, gaming all night. I suppose the decision was to keep him overnight for observation. We both felt relieved that it wasn't more serious. The patient himself, Heath, was soundly asleep. "I'll go grab some things he'll need for the overnight stay." Thinking Michelle should stay by Keith's side, I made the offer. "Could you? Thank you so much." To reassure Michelle, I grinned and said, "Leave it to me." Seeing that Michelle's face softened a little, that's when it happened. Suddenly, the treatment room door was flung open. The loud bang startled everyone inside, including the nurses. Keith, always causing trouble, entering with a loud shout, was Dr. Johnson in a white coat. He was Michelle and Keith's father. He was, without a doubt, my archenemy. And overworking, after all the talk, and leaving the house like that. Should have listened to me and become a doctor. He grabbed Keith's collar and started shaking him. The nurses rushed to intervene. This isn't how a doctor should behave towards a patient. A nurse trying to intervene, Dr. Johnson, raised his hand to strike Keith and shouted, "Wake up." Without thinking, I grabbed his arm. "Stay out of it. This is a family matter." The annoyed doctor started yelling at me. I had no intention of letting go. With all due respect, that doesn't look like a family matter to me. Keith is one of our best. I'd appreciate it if you refrain from violence. Hearing that, Dr. Johnson looked at me immediately. His eyes widened, and his mouth twisted in shock. It seemed that he finally recognized who I was. "You dare to deceive my daughter, and now my precious son too, you uneducated piece of trash." The doctor's words ignited memories of my past anger. But I'm not the same person I was back then. I won't be shaken by such remarks. As the doctor and I locked eyes, Keith woke up. "Wait, Dad, sis." I wasn't in the middle of a game, struggling to grasp the situation. Keith's confusion was evident. I gently embraced him, explaining that he had collapsed and was brought to the hospital. "Keith, get back home now. I can still get you into a decent medical school. You wouldn't go wrong if you just listened to me." The doctor's harsh rebuke made Keith bite his lip. Always being dictated and controlled like this, that's probably why he ran away, I thought. Keith's an adult now. He makes his own decisions. Your children have grown beyond your reach. I positioned myself between Keith and the doctor, shielding both Michelle and Keith. The doctor's face, filled with anger, grabbed at my collar. "You seem rather bold now. You can't hide that you quickly bailed out on my daughter with that payoff money," Michelle gasped and said from behind me. "That money was returned to you ages ago." I replied with a provocative smirk. The doctor shouted, "You're lying." "Dad, aren't you familiar with Rick's company? They've been generously donating every year." Keith's voice reflected his growing impatience. What are you talking about? Donations every year? You can't be serious." I brushed off the doctor's hand, presenting my business card once again. Recognizing the company name, the doctor's confidence wavered. "I donated that money immediately. Why would I keep it? I always intended to come back for Michelle one day." I spilled out the promise I'd held deep in my heart. The promise that, always suppressing my feelings, deceiving even myself, but I can't do that anymore. My life has always been intertwined with Michelle's. Today, our unexpected reunion made those feelings come flooding back. I've been making donations to Johnson General Hospital under my company name, initially just to repay that payoff money. The continuous donations were because I couldn't let go of my connection with Michelle. Maybe I was testing my own resolve. For a private clinic, donations are a lifeline. Staring intently at my card, the doctor suddenly changed his demeanor. "If only you'd said so. My apologies for the misunderstanding. We're always grateful for your support." Please keep it coming. His demeanor had shifted completely. He seemed nonchalant, but was oddly ingratiating. He's probably afraid I'd get upset and stop the donations. Well, I'll leave the rest to you. With that, he made a hasty exit, leaving us all dumbfounded. The rest of us were just left in shock. Both the attending physician and the nurses had surprised looks on their faces due to the sudden change in the doctor's behavior. Well then, Keith, you will be admitted for the night. Remember, managing one's health is part of a professional's job. Be more cautious from now on. I'm sorry. I will be more careful, Rick. Thank you so much for standing up to my father so firmly. I was truly moved, thank you, Heath exclaimed with joy. I felt somewhat embarrassed. Receiving praise head-on is something I never really got used to. Michelle chuckled as she watched my reaction. Listen, Michelle, it's super late, and you might be fed up waiting, but if you're still single, I mustered up the courage to tell her that. Before I could finish, Michelle interrupted. I am single. I hadn't gotten married. I couldn't forget about you after you suddenly disappeared. The earnest look in her eyes left me speechless. After I had vanished, Michelle had confronted my father. Mother had heard what had transpired, what my father had done, and felt devastated. But she laughed, saying she never thought she wouldn't see me again. I always felt that our paths would cross again. I knew it in my heart, Michelle said. She had been looking forward to that day. Tears threatened to spill from my eyes thinking about her holding on to that tiny glimmer of hope. Every day after our separation made my heart ache. I'll bring a much nicer ring next time. As I said this, scratching my head, Michelle shook hers. I like that ring. You still have it, right? Feeling like she saw right through me, I scratched my head and responded, You got me. Of course, I still have it. The ring that was returned to me as if to sever our ties. I want that ring on my finger again. I nodded firmly in response to Michelle's words. At that moment, the entire treatment room erupted into applause. The doctor, nurses, and Keith all clapped their hands, saying, Good for you, as a gesture of celebration. Suddenly, I snapped back to reality. Michelle and I weren't alone. Feeling embarrassed, I hastily left the treatment room. A few days later, Michelle and I both went to meet the doctor. At first, the doctor refused to see us, but Michelle's tears eventually won him over. All right, I'll approve the marriage, but on one condition. The head doctor's condition was to forget about the old words he said, which was amusing. It's probably about that comment he made about me being an uneducated trash, I quickly replied. Of course, I wanted to register our marriage right away, but due to work, it kept getting postponed. The one who ran out of patience was Michelle, and unusually she puffed up her cheeks, raising her voice in protest at me. She hardly ever gets angry. She hesitated a bit, and then complained in a soft voice, Please don't keep me waiting any longer. Seeing Michelle blushing and speaking shyly, I realized how long I'd kept her waiting. I'll do it right away. I stood up and left my work. I grabbed her hand and rushed to the county clerk's evening counter. Michelle said, Wait, but I had no intention of waiting any longer. Our pace quickened, and by the time the county building was in sight, we were both running, our hands tightly holding onto each other. I swore in my heart I would never let go of this hand for the rest of my life.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, One had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.